1944 will see the greatest sacrifice of life by the British and American armies.
The Allied landings on the Normandy beaches marked the beginning of the end of World War II, a conflict of such vast suffering as to defy comprehension.
This is the greatest catastrophe in human history. There's 60 million people who die in World War II. It's a death every 3 seconds for 6 years.
In his new book about the liberation of Europe, Pulitzer Prize winner Rick Atkinson quotes a German general as calling the battle for Normandy a monstrous blood mill. For the first 24 hours, General Dwight Eisenhower, the commander of Operation Overlord, did not know if his troops were winning or losing.
Eisenhower had written a message accepting full responsibility for the failure of the landings, and he never had to use it.
Last weekend, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel read the words Eisenhower never used to the graduating class at West Point as the standard for all who would lead.
The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to this attempt, it is mine alone.
It is clear that the Allies have their foothold, however precarious.
At stake was liberation from Nazi tyranny. An heroic story, but one which had a dark underside. 15,000 French citizens were killed by Allied bombings leading up to D-Day. Once the Allied forces were ashore, some GIs were left wondering whether they had liberated or obliterated French villages. The late Andy Rooney, who covered the invasion as a reporter, wrote of the French, "It was true they were being freed, but at the cost of everything they had." And beyond that, not all American soldiers conducted themselves like members of the greatest generation.
War does bad things to people in general, and it makes good soldiers do bad things, and it makes bad soldiers do terrible things.
There was a great deal of war trauma, and as a result there was a great deal of alcoholism and misbehavior.
Mary Louise Roberts was the first American to gain access to French archives which had been sealed since the war.
There was many rape accusations on the part of the Norman women.
Roberts photographed documents in which French officials complained of a regime of terror perpetrated by bandits in uniform. Atkinson came across similar documents.
The French High Command sends a letter to Eisenhower saying, look, this is not acceptable. Our women are afraid to go out at night if they're unaccompanied.
In response, Eisenhower ordered his commanders to take action against the large incidents of crimes such as rape, murder, assault, robbery, housebreaking, etc. But he still got letters from French mothers complaining GIs were taking advantage of their daughters and leaving them pregnant.
The GIs had a preconception of France as one journalist put it, a gigantic brothel. And in fact, Hitler also called France the brothel of Europe.
In her book, What Soldiers Do, Roberts writes that D-Day unleashed a veritable tsunami of male lust on French villages and towns like Le Havre.
At one point, the mayor wrote the colonel and said, couldn't we possibly have a controlled brothel up by the military base because the GIs are having sex literally everywhere, in the parks and the cemeteries and abandoned buildings.
But brothels were declared off-limits to American troops. In a Dear Ike letter protesting that order, General George Patton wrote, "It is futile to attempt to go against human nature." General Charles Gerhardt, arguing that his troops had been in combat for a hell of a while and that certain facts must be faced in this business, opened a bordello in the port of Cherbourg and was ordered to shut it down. But as for Paris...
You call Paris a lean, mean sex machine.
That it was.
What do you mean by lean, mean sex machine?
That was the place to go. The GIs only had 48 hours, and they were not going to Paris to go to the Louvre. They were going to Paris to visit the brothels.
Through it all, American GIs were perhaps the best behaved soldiers of World War II.
There are 12,000 men charged with felonies in Europe in 1944 and 45. That's out of an army of several million.
Atkinson has now written 3 books chronicling American soldiers as they fought across Europe and North Africa. In a sense, he has spent the past 14 years living with American GIs as they pressed forward in the face of death and killed time in the months of occupation.
What should people know about the American soldiers who fought in Europe for the liberation of Europe?
The notion that all the brothers were valiant and all the sisters were virtuous is nonsense. That's not how it works in war. And we should know that whether it's a war that happened 70 years ago or whether it's a war that's underway now, war really flays open the soul.
And we should know that more than 9,000 of the Americans who came ashore at Normandy lie buried in France.